Howdy everyone, Runt9 here, and welcome to Runt9 Reviews Good Company. Good Company is an automation and business production line simulation game that came out in early access a little over a month ago from developer Chasing Carrots and published by the Irregular Corporation. Now, you guys might have already seen the one-week series that we did on Good Company on this channel, and you could see that I got pretty into it. So you might already have a little bit of an idea of what this review looks like. And if you haven't seen that series, I would highly recommend it. It was a really fun 7 days, both with the game and just the way things played out. So I'll post a link to that playlist in the description below so you can go find that as well. But how about we go take a look at a little bit of gameplay. Keep in mind that with an automation game like this, you can only get a small snapshot in only a few minutes, and then we'll come back and I'll tell you what I think about Good Company. Alrighty, so how about we take a little bit of a closer look at Good Company. So we're joining a game in progress. We actually started this last Friday 5x5 and played for around an hour on the show. And so this is about an hour into this playthrough. And this, this will give you a little bit of a better idea than starting from the beginning, because it takes me more than 5 minutes to start a game of Good Company. So you can see that basically what happens if you start out with this building. And if you scroll around, you can see there's a bunch of other buildings, and you can buy these to add space to your production line. Ultimately, what you're trying to do is maintain profitability for as long as possible. And I believe that eventually there are, like, the milestones do run out. You get to milestone 8 and you're good. I don't necessarily know what the end goal is. I haven't necessarily gotten that far yet, but essentially what you're trying to do is utilize raw materials, turn them into components and modules to build electronic devices, sell those electronic devices to meet market demand, adapt to changing markets, and continue to increase your profit margins as time goes by. Sounds pretty simple, right? Well, it's an automation game, so let's see what some of the chunky mechanics end up looking like. So you can see that your bread and butter are these tinker tables. Tinker tables allow you to craft certain items. You yourself are a character in the game, but for the most part, and this was a good change that they made, you can unlock the camera from yourself and just kind of go. It used to be that you had to move around and do a lot of stuff yourself. I'm glad they removed that. That's something that I wish you didn't have to deal with in Factorio as well. So you set up tinker tables to craft certain modules and stuff. But what do you do with the modules? Well, you have this blueprint designer where you can create, and at the beginning it's only calculators. You unveil more markets as time goes by, but you can create calculators. You pick the case that you want. You can obviously research more cases. And then you have this neat little Tetris style mini game of adding different modules into the calculator to meet market expectations, to try to get full 5-star market appeal so you can sell for maximum profit. And what do I mean by Tetris style stuff? Well, each module has its own footprint in different sizes and shapes. You can see this was 3 different kinds of batteries, and they had 3 different sizes and shapes. And each case has a limited number of slots to place things in. And single cell battery is the battery you start with. It's a tier 1 module. Battery stack is a tier 2, and enhanced battery cell is a tier 4 that requires single cell batteries in its recipe. But single cell batteries give you a battery life of 0.2. So to fully meet market expected features, you need 2 single cell batteries. In addition, there's drawbacks you have to worry about as well. And drawbacks aren't a big deal early on, but they definitely can become a big deal later. Especially things like heat loss. You have to worry about maybe adding fans into your handheld video game devices in order to ensure that they don't overheat. Things like that. And so you can see, for example, if you get rid of these single cell batteries, maybe you can use 1 single cell battery to craft 1 enhanced battery cell. And now, with only 3 grid spaces of your case taken up, you've hit your battery life requirement. Similarly, with your display fidelity, a single LED array takes up the same amount of space as that enhanced battery cell, but you require 2 of them at 0.2 apiece to hit that display fidelity. Or you could go to LED matrix, which takes up only 1 more grid square and requires LED arrays in the recipe, but now you've got your 0.4. And so it'll tell you what the required raw materials are, what your assembly time looks like, and then you can, choose the case, you can change the appearance and all that, and you save your blueprint, and that's ultimately one of the products that you can sell. And what you do is you have assembly tables where you take in the different modules that you just placed, including the case, and you have someone assemble the product. And so basically what you're doing is you have incoming and outgoing zones. In your incoming zone, you order the raw materials that you need. You bring the raw materials via logistics, which we'll look at in a second, to areas where people at your tinker tables, and all of these, each tinker table is staffed by a single worker, and logistics are people moving things around. Later on, you do get conveyor belts to move things around a lot easier, but in the beginning, it's people moving things around. You craft what you need, get the modules over to your assembly tables, assemble them, and then put them in the outgoing zone to make money. And you can also put modules directly in the outgoing zone if you have extra, stuff like that. Usually not a good idea. Usually you want to focus on your actual outputted designs, but you can certainly go the route of throwing modules in the outgoing zone. So for logistics, you have these logistics workplaces. And basically what this does is any employees assigned to this will haul things from the input, being shelves or incoming, outgoing zones, whatever the case may be, to anywhere that the logistical connections are set up to go to. So as an example, this logistics workplace will take this as an input or this shelf as an input, and then take those objects to anywhere else in your facility. Well, what does that actually mean? Let's take a look at the logistics panel, or the logistics view. So let's say I click on the incoming zone. I can see where it's connected to. So for example, for chemicals, you need chemicals to craft batteries, and I've got a bunch of battery crafting set up over here. So I want to have the chemicals be hauled to a shelf that is much closer to the batteries so that they don't have to walk all the way to the incoming zone, all the way back, craft the battery, and then put it on a shelf somewhere or take it all the way over to the assembly tables. And this shelf, for example, has cases and plastic. You have the cases here. The plastic comes in, the cases go out. You can't explain that. The cases go to this shelf. This shelf has all of your finished modules, your batteries, your LED arrays, your cases coming in from these main work areas. And then you have the logistics point over here, which I have this one set up to only use this shelf as an input, carry those to this shelf so they can be used by the assembly table. And so that's basically the meat and bones of or meat and potatoes of the game. The only other thing to talk about is research, where essentially you have analysis desks where you break down crafted modules into research points that then you have a worker at a research desk or multiple research desks, turn those research data into progress on your research. And I knew that I just flew through this, but it's an automation game. There's a lot going on. This should give you a good feel for it. And this is in free play mode. There's also a campaign with a lot of different challenges and stuff like that involved that you can take on. But ultimately, it's take raw materials, turn them into components, which are yellow, modules, which are purple. Use modules to craft outputted final electronic devices, sell those, make money, adapt to the market changing, which this is the market screen. There's a lot of details here, but essentially every 120 days, it changes to a new phase, which either adds new features or increases the expected features. And your existing ones lose market rating. If the market is now expecting something better, you can discount them, so on and so forth. I'm flying through this, I'm rambling. There's a lot to this game. Hopefully this gives you a good look. How about we go talk about what I think about Good Company? Alrighty, welcome back. Hopefully you enjoyed that quick look at Good Company. And again, you have to preface this by saying you only got a very small view of the automation. There's a large tech tree. There's a lot of build up and financial stuff and market stuff happening. But that should give you a good idea of the core concepts that the game builds upon. So for the review system, we use the cards review system here on this channel that I put together, and you can always go check out the intro video in the description below if you are not familiar with that review system. So let's go ahead and jump in with the game's core gameplay loop. So I obviously did have a lot of fun with this game. It scratches that same itch that Factorio did when I got horrendously addicted back a few years ago. And I always love the tycoon style game of start with a little bit, build up from there, research more stuff, do more complicated automation, use that to do better and better stuff, and just rinse and repeat. And that is very much the loop. I also like the fact that there is a potential of losing. You can go bankrupt, and so you have to adapt. And I think that that makes it a little bit more special than some of the other games in this genre. I'm going to put that core gameplay loop at an A-. Now, you probably just heard me talk about all this stuff and then see an A- and think, well, it sounds like you might have gone maybe up to an A or an A+. And what I'm going to say to that is, while I agree with, I agree with myself and also agree that it feels like it should probably be a little bit higher on core gameplay loop. My main drawback with the core gameplay loop is it feels a little frantic at times, and not in a good way. With Factorio, it always felt frantic in that there was the ever-pressing threat of aliens attacking, and also it was easy for you to run out of resources and have your production lines backed up and whatnot. The franticness with Good Company is the market can shift, and all of a sudden, your $2,000 profit has turned into a $1,000 loss each month. And you have to be ready ahead of time, but you never have enough room in any of your buildings. And so you need to buy more buildings and get more tables and hire more people. And it's a little bit much. And I think part of it is because of some of the quality of life stuff that they're continuing to work on, that logistics can be very difficult to deal with, even with the conveyor belts and stuff like that. There's not specializations of the workers. Every worker is the same, which means, they basically are robots, and that's, not as fun as it could be. And I also think that just ultimately the guts of the game is just a little bit low on the overall content side. But it is a really solid framework for an automation game, for a production game. And again, I really do like the fact that you're not just fighting against yourself to see how cool and how awesome can you get your automation, how efficient can your automation and production line be, but you also have to fight against the fact that you can go bankrupt. You will go bankrupt probably within your first couple playthroughs, and see what happens if you don't adapt properly. It's a little bit much for me, and it got to the point where after I think I'm around the 15-hour mark, I don't know that the core gameplay loop is as good as it possibly could be with some more fine-tuning. And the game is in early access, so obviously they can do a lot more fine-tuning, but that's where it sits right now, is at that A-. And now, for the game's atmosphere, it's one of those things that, like, for a production line automation game, it could almost be text-based and I wouldn't care too terribly much. So definitely take this atmosphere score with a grain of salt. And I'm giving it a B, mostly because it doesn't matter, but also because there's nothing that stands out about it. There's not a lot of negatives. There's not a lot of positives. It's just fine. The UI at times is a little clunky. I talked about how frustrating logistics can be, and that's one of the major points that the developer has put on the roadmap is like, we want to make logistics easier and better. So the UI isn't always perfect. The graphics are just fine. It's got a very similar graphic style to a lot of other games in this genre. Very typical art assets. The sound design is just there. And so, but again, like if you're worried about atmosphere in an automation game, then I think it's maybe not necessarily the right genre for you. My perspective on it is I play these types of games for the mechanics, and I want to get lost in the automation. And that's the other part of the atmosphere here is, while I do get drawn in, and again, kind of get caught in that loop of frantically trying to be ahead of the market instead of reacting to the market changing in front of me, and now my products aren't good enough to sell well anymore. I do get immersed in that, but I don't think it's as immersive as it could be. I think that there could just be more systems. Not necessarily like the systems that are there are fairly deep and fairly complex, and I like those, but I think they could add in more systems and more ways to mitigate the market loss when your product kind of stinks, because right now the only way to mitigate that is to just discount your product or build a new product and hope you have the space and the capital to shift to more complex builds. And so that's where the atmosphere goes in it. It's not really that important for this game. That's not really playing into the overall score here, but it is the review system that it is. And so there's your atmosphere. Now, moving on to ultimately the one score that matters the most with a game like this is replayability. And unfortunately, I'm giving the replayability a C+. And I know that right out of the gate, you're going to think, how in the world can you give a game like this a C+? Aren't there so many different things you can research in the tech tree and so many different products you can build and different markets you can dive into and things like that? Yeah, absolutely. But here's the problem with that, is you get to the end goal basically the same way every time. Now, that's not to say that there's a minimum path or a silver bullet, or, if you always craft these things or always do these things in the tech tree, you win, but it doesn't feel different enough each time you start. Basically, I got to the point where after I had my couple of failures, I had a pretty solid success, played it for a while, got a little overwhelmed and said, okay, that's good for that run. I don't know that I want to do another one. It's too frantic for me. And I also think that every single time I did it, I only made very minor modifications to my formula of here's how I want to get product to market. And those minor modifications didn't feel substantial enough. I didn't feel like I had enough tools in the toolbox to play around with, to experiment with, other than how do I, optimize the efficiency a little bit more? How do I optimize the logistics? Where do I put my shelves? Where do I put my benches? And do I research some more complex stuff quickly, or just throw a bunch of people at it and deal with the space constraints? That's pretty much all the decisions I made, and I don't think that's enough. I don't think there's enough depth in the overall amount of mechanics to make this game highly, highly replayable, like something like Factorio does. And, when you're talking about the automation space, it's basically just like I do with a lot of other reviews. If I talk about a roguelike deck builder, I'm going to be comparing it to Slay the Spire. If you're talking about something in the automation genre, you're going to get compared to Factorio. And there's a good reason for that. I mean, go look at the reviews on Steam, see how many people love that game, see how well that game has continued to grow over time. That, to me, is the gold standard of an automation game. And Factorio is a game that every single time you play, yes, you have a single end goal, but the way you get there can be wildly different. This starts you on the same map, same building, the same starting tech tree. The start of the game is the same, and there's very little differentiation between playthrough to playthrough. And I feel like the only way to make it different is to kind of create your own differences. And I would much prefer that the game gave me avenues to do that in its own way. That's not to say that you may not have fun replaying the game, but I think this game has an upper limit that is closer to that 20-hour mark than something like Factorio, which is near infinity. So that's why the replayability comes in at that C+. And again, I think that's probably the biggest knock I have on the game, is I just don't, I'm not drawn to keep playing it. Even though my first couple playthroughs were incredibly enjoyable, again, that's that huge difference between the core gameplay loop and the replayability, is I can have a lot of fun playing it at first, and then it can get stale quickly. And that's what this game did for me. Now, moving into the difficulty of the game, you kind of already heard me talk about the franticness and how much, you know, you're always on that razor's edge. And I think that that's good, but I think it's very improperly balanced right now. So I'm giving the difficulty a B-. And again, I love the fact that there is a loss condition of you can go bankrupt. And this is one thing that I like better than in Factorio. Because in Factorio, you can survive, but have buildings destroyed, which is very anti-fun in the sense that, like, I built up this cool automation engine and then part of it got destroyed. Whereas in Good Company, it's an all or nothing. You don't lose some tinker tables or have some workers get sick and be out for a month in the hospital or anything crazy like that. It's you either succeed or you go bankrupt, you close the doors and your game is over. That's good. I want it to be balanced significantly better. The market changes are fine for the most part, but I want to be able to adapt better without some of the operational complexity. And the operational complexity mostly comes from the fact that logistics is a pain to deal with. And so when you have, you know, 3 different components you have to build in order to build a higher tier module, that then you have to take that module and some more raw materials and some more components to build another module in order to meet the minimum demand, your mind starts, my mind started exploding a little bit. And I don't know, the fun started wearing off. And I think that if that were balanced a little bit better, the logistics were better, the market wasn't as rough, like adding a new feature and making you upgrade existing features is realistic. Like, you absolutely need to do that in the real world. You can't just be like, hey, look at new shiny thing. You also need to make existing shiny things better. But I think in this game, it's a little bit too hard to adapt, and that's why the difficulty comes in at that B-. And now moving to another really strong positive for the game is the support category. The developer has been on top of things in the community, fixing the biggest problems that the game has. I mean, right out of the gate, one of the things that I complained about was I want to be able to upgrade a tinker table into the requisite module, faster, more efficient table without having to redo all of the logistics for that table and reassigning the worker and all that. And a lot of people complained about that. So what did they do? They've released it in a hotfix. They've got a good roadmap. You know exactly what's coming up. And they've done a really good job so far, albeit, again, and this is a common complaint I have, doing more of improving what they already have instead of adding more content. And that's why it's an A-. And I think it's technically only the third A- I've given, but a lot of things hover in that B to A- range in support. A lot of these early access indie games, I'm going to have pretty much always the same criticisms. And it's mostly that they do a fantastic job of being involved with the community and listening to feedback and making good changes and getting bug fixes out there. The patch schedule has been very well done. But I don't know that the future vision of the game, the additional content that's going to be added, is good enough to push it up to that A or A+. That's not to say that it's not good. And again, I do think that this is a game that I could come back to in a year and probably be very impressed with where the game has come to. But as it sits right now, based on what I've seen, based on what's in the roadmap, I think that an A- is fair in saying that, hey, you guys are doing a fantastic job at getting this game where it needs to be. I just want to see more. And you're going to hear me say I want to see more in a lot of reviews because that is a very common complaint, albeit with the caveat that, again, it's not a very large group of people working on the game. This isn't a AAA title where they can just throw money at it and a bunch of stuff can get added. So I'm fully aware that, like, more isn't necessarily always easy, but that's also like, I can't give you an A+ just because I know you can't get there. if that makes sense. So again, an A- is also still really good, and I do believe that this is a very, very strong suit of the game, is the support for it. And so we need to move into my final tier ranking. And as you guys kind of saw, I had some up and down with this game. When we did our series on YouTube, when I played a little bit on stream, this game had just a lot of pull for me. But I think what finally did it and kind of put the nail in the coffin of, I'm going to put this game on the shelf and come back to it later, was I played it on last week's Friday 5x5. You'll see the VOD come up on YouTube. You can go check it out on twitch.tv/Rut9plays and all that. That made me realize that I couldn't get excited enough to commentate well. And that's why I think at this point, I'm going to put Good Company in my solid tier. Is it, at its core, a fun game? Yes. Unequivocally, unabashedly, 110%, yes, it is a fun game. But is it a great game? Does it break the mold of automation games? Does it do anything new and unique that sets it apart from the crowd? Not really. And that's not a bad thing. I always have to make sure that I add the requisite caveats to this tier ranking. Good Company is a good game, pun intended. And I'm going to go look up the price right now. It's $25. And that's hard for me to warrant for this game. It is an early access. It has a lot of room to grow. The framework, the skeleton, the bones of this game are solid, which is why it's in that solid tier. But honestly, at $25, I think that this game would need to be a lot closer to completion for me to recommend it. The value proposition and the long-term keeping it in your collection, wanting to go back to it, do another playthrough, letting that playthrough take 20 plus hours, I don't think that's there. And honestly, I don't know if it'll ever get there. I do think that this game is one that I am very happy to have in my collection, very much want to keep a close eye on. I'm going to read every patch that comes out, and sometimes I'm going to say, hey, that's a cool patch. I want to go see what it added. I'm going to hop in and do, another playthrough for a little bit. But I don't know. It kind of just grinded on me. And I think for some people, they will enjoy the difficulty, the razor's edge, I know what the market is going to do, so I'm going to prep for it, even though optimizing the space and efficiency is frustratingly difficult. A lot of people will enjoy that. And I think for a lot of people, this would be in a tier above where I'm putting it. Again, this is purely a subjective review. I like the game, but I don't love the game. And I certainly don't think it's one of the best games ever made. And that's why solid is the correct tier for it. And again, solid is still good. It is above mediocre. So, and maybe I don't have to give all these caveats. Maybe people are aware that hey, solid is still good. If you see this game on sale for half off, absolutely pick it up. It's one that if you ever see it on sale for something 30, 40, 50% off, go ahead and put it in your collection. Do your couple playthroughs, fail, hit your bankruptcy, see what you did wrong, improve upon that, get to the point where okay, I'm comfortable with this game, and then put it on the shelf and come back to it every so often. I think that's what a lot of people are going to do with this game. I bet if I go scroll through some of the Steam reviews right now, there's not going to be a lot of 100+ hours. There's going to be 2.5, 14, 31, 57, 5, 4, 73, 30, 23. There's a 208, 45, 37. So you can see a lot of 20 to 50 hours. And I think that right now that's about what the game can offer. And if you can hit that 50-hour mark, then absolutely pay $25 for it. If you're closer to the 20-hour mark, I don't know that $25 is necessarily going to get you there. And again, it's also funny that we talk about video games like this when you could go spend $20 for, you and your significant other to go see a movie and have a soda. And it's that's a couple hours as opposed to this is something that could be 20 hours for $25. Whatever. I know what we're saying. Good Company is in my solid tier. I'm going to stop rambling about it. I think I've said my piece, and that's going to do it. So anyways, thank you all so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the review. Let me know your feedback in the forms of likes, dislikes, comments. Check out the link tree in the description below so you can find me on Twitter, Twitch, Discord, all that good stuff. In addition, make sure you subscribe to this channel so you can see more reviews like this, more playthroughs of cool games like this, all sorts of stuff. And just in general, make sure that you keep up with what I'm doing, because there's always going to be new and exciting stuff coming in the future. But until next time, I am Rut9, and I'll see you later.